Hi, my friends, and welcome. I'm so glad you're here to join me. My name is Renee. I am an intuitive healer, and it's my mission to help people to heal from codependency and abuse and to learn how to love themselves and how to know their value. In today's video, this is the part 2, the second video in the series I started on healing from narcissistic abuse. And in the first video, I discussed some of the hallmarks, the pillars that define narcissism. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about another one of those central pillars. And I'm only going to be talking about this in the entire video, and that is lack of empathy. A lack of empathy is a huge defining characteristic of narcissism that I wanted to devote an entire video to just that part. So we're going to be getting into some really good information, so I hope you'll stick around. So what we have to first understand is that whether we had a narcissistic parent or we were in a relationship with someone who was narcissistic, is that they have no capacity to have empathy. And we may try. And if you had a narcissistic parent, you likely grew up trying to get them to see you, trying to get them to see who you were, to see that they were hurting you, but they never did because they can't. So what we have to first break down is a few things. The first is we need to understand what empathy is and what it looks like, and the difference between empathy and sympathy. So empathy is the ability to feel with or into somebody else. So if someone comes up to you, for example, and they start telling you about some really difficult situations they're going through in life, and whether you have had those same situations or not presented to you, you are able to listen and be present. And you may not know what to say or what to offer, but you give them your unconditional presence. You understand what it must be like if you haven't been in that situation. You're able to put yourself in their shoes, so to speak. You're able to sit in the dark with them, to be by their side, and to give them compassion. It doesn't mean that you take on the problem as their own. It doesn't mean that it is now your issue too, but it means that you are just alongside them to give them support and love and compassion. Now, sympathy, on the other hand, is the more shallow or superficial cousin to empathy. Sympathy is I feel bad for you. From up here where I am, where things are nice and comfortable, I feel bad for you over there, that you're going through that. So empathy is, I think of it as this much deeper ability to understand and feel pain. In order to feel empathy, we have to make ourselves vulnerable. We have to tap into that part of ourself that remembers a similar painful experience in the past, or can imagine what it would feel like, so that we can understand what someone else feels. The narcissist has zero capacity to do this. They don't allow themselves to be vulnerable. They don't allow themselves to stop and think for a moment, I can see that what I said might have been hurtful, or I can see that what I did was extremely destructive and abusive, and then take responsibility. That is not what the narcissist does. As I said in the first video, the narcissist gets love by getting you to do what they want them to do, to be who they want you to be, to make them look good. And if you're pointing out something that they're doing and saying, you hurt me, you're damaging the relationship, you broke trust, or what you said was cruel, that is in direct opposition to their need for validation and to appear like everything they do is perfect and good and great. They can't allow themselves to be vulnerable and to go through that thought process. They don't take responsibility and go through that process of saying, I could see why you feel that way, and I'm going to make amends, and I'm going to make this better, and I'm going to work on myself and work on my healing. That's not what the narcissist does. They cannot do that. The other thing that is closely tied to this topic of lack of empathy is gaslighting. Gaslighting is essentially when it's a form of emotional abuse, and it's extremely damaging. And it is when the other person makes you think you're crazy by denying your reality. If they say something to hurt you or do something that's hurtful and you cry or you get upset or you show on your face that you're not happy or you say that this is not okay and you draw a boundary, anything other than going along with it, you might be met with something like, you need to stop being so sensitive. You know, you're really blowing this out of proportion. You're just so into drama. You're just overreacting. You know, I think you really need some help. You know, stop being such a baby. I just have to be really careful about what I say around you. I guess, you know, I'm always on pins and needles around you because you're just so sensitive. My God. All of those are forms of gaslighting that make the other person doubt themselves and say, oh, wow, maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Maybe, was it wrong of me to feel that? Well, that was really hurtful, but I mean, what, you know. So what it does is it starts in someone who grew up this way, or if they've been in a relationship where this has been this emotionally abusive pattern for years, and you've been conditioned and you've lost yourself, or if you grew up with this, you never got that chance to develop self-esteem and self-confidence, and you have lost or never got to develop this strong core of who you are, of boundaries, of respect. And what the other person is doing is, once again, they don't like that you're holding the mirror up and saying, hey, this is not okay. This hurts. This is cruel. This is not okay with me. And that is not supporting their sense of self. And their sense of self is huge. It's grandiosity. It's this magnified sense of self-importance. You're challenging that. And the response is to gaslight you, to invalidate your reality. Zero consideration of how you're feeling, why you have the feelings you do, whether your perception is correct or not is not even the issue. There's no attempt to try to understand. So if you do not have that sense of strength within you, if you do not have that self-esteem and that confidence to say, no, this is not okay, and I don't stick around people who treat me this way, that gaslighting will hook you, and it'll poke holes and inject doubt, self-doubt, more self-doubt, more self-doubt. Years go by and you find you don't have anything. You don't believe in yourself, and you learn now to invalidate yourself. You learn that if you feel something, that becomes what you heard, becomes your self-talk. Well, I really don't like this going on, but you know, maybe I'm just overreacting, and you know, I'm just being irrational, and maybe I'm just stressed out, and you know, so all of that kind of talk now is what you now learned to do to yourself. If you grew up with a narcissistic parent, you got this big time. And so what we have to do to heal this is begin a process of a lot of time, of years. And we can start today by reparenting ourselves. And the first thing we can do to reparent ourselves is to give ourselves permission to have the feelings we have without judgment. That we have to suspend that voice in our head, that introject, that's like the miniature version of the parent that's talking to you and saying, you know, that we learned growing up. We hear their voice in our head that is immediately talking back. When we start to feel something and we can hear their voice say, see, there you go again. You're just being too sensitive. You're this, you're that, you're not good enough. That whole tirade, that crap. That's what we got to start saying. Aha, I see the difference now. That's the old stuff. That's my mother's voice, my father's voice, my ex's voice, well, whomever. This is how I feel. Maybe you are overreacting. That's not relevant. That's not the point. The first step is to allow yourself to have the feelings you have without judging yourself for having them. That's the first step in reparenting yourself. The second thing you need to start to do is to value who you are. We tend to, if we grew up with heavy, intense emotional abuse, like narcissistic abuse, is we tend to focus on what's wrong with us, on our weaknesses, and I put that in quotes because they're really not weaknesses. And we discount our strengths. We discount and discredit whatever we're good at, what we bring, what we have to offer to others, to friends, to in our work, to a partner. We totally discount that and we focus on our flaws. And one of the ways that we can start to value ourselves is to understand that we all have flaws. Those are what make you lovable. And that we no longer need to focus on the negative, on what is wrong, on fixing ourselves. And when we grow up with emotional abuse, that is where the focus is at. It's on the problem, on the black and white, all good or bad. And maybe you often were put into the all bad category, the scapegoat. Or maybe you were the favorite, all good, and you felt immense pressure to be who they wanted you to be, or else, and you suppressed parts of yourself. I'm going off a little bit on a tangent there. But what we have to do is to appreciate ourselves. No one's perfect. We don't have to act perfect. And when we grow up with emotional abuse, that drives us to be perfect and to act perfect. Yet, we all know intellectually that's not attainable, and that would be so boring if we lived in a world where everyone was perfect. So work on those two main things, and those two have a lot within them. Reparenting yourself by allowing yourself to feel your feelings without judging yourself. Suspend that interject of the parent. See it for what it is, talk back to it and say, yeah, I know you're there. I'm not buying it. I'm not falling for it this time. And then the second part is to start to know your value. And you can do that by appreciating yourself, appreciating and noticing. And yes, you do have things that you bring. We all do. Enjoy those and acknowledge those and focus on those instead of the lack, instead of perceived flaws or faults, because that's just more of that old program. So there's a lot in those two categories. Those two take time, but we can start today, and we can just start by monitoring how we think and talking back to and changing the negative, critical voice that we learned growing up. Okay? Keep moving forward. And I'm going to be putting out more content on this topic. Like I said, this is part 2. I'm not sure how many parts there are going to be total. I'm just kind of, but there's a couple more that I have in mind. So stay tuned for that and keep working on your healing. And I give you a big hug for working on this, because this stuff is not easy, but we came here to heal and to evolve and to ascend. And this is part of that process. So keep moving forward, keep being strong, and keep knowing how awesome and wonderful you are. Okay. That's it for today's video. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next week.